All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody, for joining our live discussion of this fantastic book, Warhost of Vastmark. I always goof up, I get tongue twisted whenever I'm saying this title, but this is book three of the Wars of Light and Shadow series by the wonderful Janny Wurts. We have a wonderful panelist here today. So before we get into the discussion of the book itself, shall we have a quick round of introduction? Rob, Blaise, would you like to go first? Can you hear me?
Blaise?
Oh, sorry. It kind of like went in and out. Quick introduction. Everybody, Blaise from Under the Radar SFF Books. Started reading this series 2 years ago. I'm now doing my second reread of it. And Warhost just completely dropped my jaw every time I kept reading chapter after chapter after chapter and the revelations to come. So you guys are in for a treat with this one, I promise you. And if you don't want to read the rest of the series after reading Warhost, I don't know. You're missing on something fantastic. So we're all here to discuss it.
Great. Pierre?
Hey, PL Stuart here. I love Janny's writing. She's my favorite author. I have no regrets about that. As you can see behind me, also on this side, the collection's almost complete. Just missing Peril's Gate. I'll have that soon for the Wars of Light and Shadow. Of course, there's so many other books of Janny's that I plan to read. I'm going to have a separate shelf when I buy them all. This book, wow, this book was. This is a book that I'm still recovering from in some ways, but certainly I agree with Blaise that if you've read up to this point in the Wars of Light and Shadow, and this book doesn't convince you to read the rest of the series, yeah, I don't know. It was absolutely phenomenal. So just masterclass work, as is all of Janny's writing. But this book, I'm only up to Future Prince in my Wars of Light and Shadow journey. I've read it, so I'm going on to the next book, Grand Conspiracy, soon. However, I am totally immersed. I'm totally engaged. This is just an incredible journey, and can't wait to talk about this one.
Awesome.
Well, hi,
Niko.
Yeah, I'm Niko from Niko's Book Reviews, and I have the combo version, and so I always get the two parts mixed up together with titles. But yeah, I finished this. I've been trying to resist starting the next book until we had this, because I wanted to just keep this and not like go off into everything else with Fugitive Prince. But I have been absolutely loving it. I've been trying to sell people a while on Cycle of Fire too, and this was my first of the Janny Wurts books that I found, and so I was working on that, and I'm like, okay, I got to try this big series that I've heard that Janny Wurts has, and that's supposed to be better than like anything ever. And Curse of the Mistwraith, I really, really loved. Starting this with Ships of Merrier, really, really loved. But then, yeah, Warhost Vastmark, I flew through so fast, just could not put it down. And I do have my full collection, including a paperback of Storm Fortress now. So I'm good and ready for the last one. So.
Awesome. So before we get into detailed discussions and questions and all kind of gushing we are all waiting for, I would like to ask Janny if you would like to say a few general words about this book and how important this book, at least I felt that. I hope you also feel the same, that toward when you consider the entire book series, I think this is kind of pivotal because many characters get unexpected arc and maybe will pave pave way for what is supposed to come in the future books. So a few general words before we get into specifics and details.
Each arc separates out certain concepts, and each arc in the series encompasses a certain phase of a character's handling of their fate, whether they're resisting it or whether they're going forward with it. And so when you get to an arc finish, which Warhost is an arc finish, many things come together, and it's a pivotal point for all of the characters. They're going to start off with a different philosophy in the next book. So where Curse was more history being written by the victor. Warhost is, does the means justify the ends? But there's a ton of other little themes just buried in there. And what you aren't going to see at this stage is the staging for the actual world and how it works. The pieces are there. When you've read the whole series, you'll go back to Warhost and you'll see just miles more into the material. But I had to parse it in stages because having just finished Song of the Mysteries, there is no way I could tackle all those layers at once in any one story. So you learn what you're seeing as the characters do. And the arc finishes hit a peak point. So what people aren't necessarily expecting as a fourth book, if you're starting into the following book after Warhost, is that it's like a bicycle chain. It's going to gear back to a different gear. It's going to slow down and re-examine certain things. There will be characters that will gain immense amount of depth. The story isn't sprawling. It's setting you up for worldview where you're really going to see the clash of ethics, and where your ethic is coming from, what your moral high ground is going to determine the decisions that you make. And that is the fifth arc. You will see the worldview. So here in Warhost, you're really immersed in the characters. The depth and the emotion of the characters is built. The depth and the emotion of the conflict is built. You're thoroughly invested before you step into the bigger picture, because I didn't want the reader to get lost and uninvolved because there was too many details that did not relate. You'll be ready for that, but be prepared that 5 books in arc 3 are going to build Storm Fortress is going to knock Warhost out of the water. Trust me. But it's a 5-book build. It will take its time getting there, and there's a reason for that. So don't be thrown. I didn't lose the reins. I didn't lose control of anything. We are staging for a different step. But yeah, Warhost is an arc finish. You can expect every arc finish to have that absolutely crashing emotional finale every single time. And the series as a whole will do the same thing. So that's probably what I would say affected me when I wrote this. One of the music that played in the background was the Fires of Calais. I don't know if you ever heard that folk song, but you certainly know the battle in World War II where the fishermen went and saved all those soldiers that were stranded on the beach and they were under heavy gunfire. I wanted that gut wrench at the ending of Warhost. I wanted that feeling of everything coming apart and everything coming together at the same time, the best and the worst of humanity in that one crushing moment and all that led up to it. So often music has played a big theme in the background, but that one definitely was one of the emotional, not the event, but the emotional impact of what I was trying to achieve in Vastmark at the close.
Wow, that's awesome.
I'm
And we
somehow
have a
even
few
more
comments
excited.
in. Yes, we have a few comments coming in. So Chibi Post Library is with us. So that is a fantastic Arathon painting in the background there.
Well, that was the first first portrait I ever did of the character in 1973. We go up, and the crash in the background was one of my Bengals. You're not paying attention to me, so I'm going to kick stuff off shelves. So be ready. The cats are going to definitely have their piece here. So yeah, hi. So yeah, I'm glad that you appreciate the painting. That's cool.
And there's another comment. This book was amazing, and I loved how a character's arc across this book. I think I know which character. It being the latter half of the hardcover means that arc is only part of it for a character, but even by itself, it works. And we have Andrew here. Hey all, haven't started yet, so I'm just popping in to say I'm excited for this. Have a great discussion panel. Janny is a new favorite author for me.
This is lovely.
Andrew's awesome.
And don't worry, Janny. I've given him tons of crap for not starting Cycle of Fire earlier when I first recommended it to him. Finally got to him, and now he's loving it like I knew he would. And so he's at least sold going forward.
Yeah, he did a brilliant review on Cycle of Fire.
Yeah, we definitely have a lack of nautical fantasy from a person who's actually sailed offshore. There are a couple that have done a pretty good job with it, but this is firsthand experience in that book, and it shows.
It shows, yeah.
The funny thing is that the offshore sailing experience that I got was, I guess I got about 3,000 miles logged, mostly on small yachts, though on period sailing ships as well. I actually did those trips because of a scene that happens in Destiny's Conflict, in the Wars of Light and Shadow. And I said, I cannot write the scene unless I have done this. So I was actually gathering research for the big series, but the little one kind of got there first.
And I know which scene you're talking about,
John. Oh yeah, you know the scene I'm talking about, and you absolutely know that you could not write that scene without firsthand experience. Couldn't be done.
Yep.
It is just I need to start Fugitive Prince the second we're off of this, because this is killing me.
Fantastic! It was fantastic.
It is a great book.
I have to wait with my next book because I have promised Peel that I will start A Drowned Kingdom, and I was supposed to do it in February, but I have to do this month, so I'm starting it.
Read it first. Read trust me.
No.
Drowned Kingdom doesn't go anywhere. Read Fugitive Prince first. Read it first.
The Drowned Kingdom reads really, really smooth. It won't take you a month to get through it. So go ahead and read that first if you want to. I'm fine, And the other thing is
both for sure this month.
Fugitive Prince opens and the markers have changed. The markers have shifted. And the opening scene is going to kind of surprise you because it's just staging for something new. You're not going to be able, all the earmarks of this series, you're not going to be able to predict how it unfolds, because if I could, I hate reading a book and I can second guess it. So, the opening of Fugitive Prince will wait for you. You'll be fine.
Awesome. And okay, Andrew is saying I'm on Shadow Fane, and I have all the hardcovers through Peril's Gate as a birthday gift to myself.
Wow. That's awesome. That's a great present, Angie.
Hardcovers are hard to find, so good for them.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Well, when I get this turned in, there will be a head-to-head with what's going on with this series. There definitely was not any preparation or paying attention going with the reprint orders. The British agent is now on that. The person behind the desk at HarperCollins is now aware of it. And so it's just a case of keeping on slamming it until they pay attention. So the books are difficult to get, but this will not last forever. And I'd like to see if I can get them to think about doing another expanded format book, not just a mass market, because they're big books. But we'll see. I have no idea. What happens is the snapshot of what the sales are doing on the day that these requests are made is going to affect everything. I wish I could change that. I'm sure there's serendipity. I'm sure there's something on the shelf that I'm not aware of that could change the course of this without that happening. But the readers are driving it at the moment. And right now we have a year or so. They haven't given me a pub date yet, but it should get settled pretty soon. We have that year to build up, and that will determine the fate of the series as far as the corporation's part in it is concerned. So this is a critical time period, so I could not be prouder to be here and more pleased to see the interest of the people that are giving their time this morning. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, and since more and more booktubers are getting into it, and people like Andrew and the bigger booktubers start reading it, I'm sure the demand for the books and interest in the books is only going to go up from here. I'm sure. Andrew saying I'm going to get the ebooks as well. Basically, just take my money.
That's music to your ears, eh, Janny?
Well, the ebook, I think Amazon pulled one of its funny things where it just dropped the price because it felt like it. So Curse of the Mistwraith right now, last that Blaise looked, was like $2.99. That's as cheap as the Gallant, my novella, on my web store. So go for it, because hopefully they'll get that fixed. But it was never expensively priced. I mean, numbers. I wish we lived in a different world that's the way it works. And these books have been buried for a long time, and I could only do so much as the author without any readers aware of it. And frankly, Ingram's didn't even list these books as available to be ordered. Crazy. So I had to focus just on the story. And now that the story is done, let's see what the story can do for itself, because I would hope the cream will rise. An awful lot went into correcting, doing these books. 50 years of planning, 50 years. There's nothing in there that isn't deliberate. So we'll see what happens.
Incredible.
Before we
Curse
get
is still
into
on
the
sale.
spoiler
too.
What?
Curse is still on sale too on Amazon. It's at $2.99. If anyone's watching wants to pick it up,
Snag it.
Kindle version, right?
correct.
So what really moved you about this book?
Oh, so much. Talith and Dakar. It just, wow. Dakar. What Angie mentioned it. That is, of all the things in this book, that was just, I'm still speechless about it. Because, we've seen where we thought his arc perhaps was going and what he would potentially do to Erathon. And then what he ended up doing in this book was, I'm still speechless about it. Still that. And for me, Taylor, I'd love to hear what everyone else has to say. I think the thing about her that got me was that, the initial impression is that she's this spoiled, willful, impulsive, perhaps a bit vapid, like she's this, and she's so impetuous, and she's trying to do something, largely born out of that impetuosity and wanting to do this thing that in her mind she thinks is going to help her husband, but ends up having the complete opposite effect. But then seeing her in the situation, still being spoiled, willful, etc., but yet seeing that other side to her, that that you wrote so well, Jenny, I think that really hit home, and especially knowing a bit of the future, right, from reading Ford in future prints. So yeah, that
she's an interesting character because she has such clobbering good looks, and she's bold with it. She gets away with murder, as we see in life happening. So to me, one of the most fun scenes was when she assaults Pesquel in the bathtub and tucks his clothes out the window to get what she wants. She's used to being able to just bowl through any person, any man, wrap them around their finger, flummox them completely, and take charge. And when it doesn't work, what happens to her is a major change moment. And one of the things that I hope people didn't miss when they read this book is looking carefully in Dakar's journey when he realizes, that moment when he realizes, when the ransom is exchanged, that Lysair binds people to them and caters to their flaws. He tells them what they want to hear. He keeps them dependent. He knows how to manipulate codependence. So they just got to get addicted to his presence because they can't feed the fire any other way. They're empty. They're hollow. And he snags that and he uses it. Erathon doesn't. He takes the flaws and throws them back into your face until you're so freaking sick of them, you wake up and you get rid of them. And that's in microcosm what happens to Talith. It's in macrocosm what happens to Dakar. But watch that power play throughout the entire series. This is a character that comes across as not likable in Curse of the Mistwraith. Why? Because he doesn't tell you what you want to hear. And he has no patience when you aren't listening to yourself or you're not paying attention to what is actually happening. When you're running off beliefs that don't have foundation, he will shred you until you stop it. And so that unlikable character that has an underriding current that is different from the hero that you expect. Lysair plays the hero you expect. And he props you up on that until you cannot stand by yourself. The other one shoves you off until you learn to stand on your feet. I would hope that this book drills that point home, because it's going to be a key factor of understanding the characters going forward as to where their denials are and where they are not, and the supporting characters, where they run into trouble in their interactions and where they do not. And on a bigger screen, how do we do our lives? Do we make people dependent because of their flaws, or do we throw them off and say, stand up? I'm not going to cater to this. So I often feel like there's so much going on in this story that is so emotionally investing. You're reading it for the action, but maybe sometimes the underlying dynamic of what is really happening isn't seen until your second read. Good question, Blaise.
Yes, it is very much the first time you go through it, you don't get the full impact of as terms of like a whole world view of just what that means. It struck me even more, especially Dakar. What he goes through in this book, his like the revelations, which we'll save for the spoiler section. Not going to ruin that for you. Yeah, it completely blew me away on my second read. Apart from Dakar and Talith, the two factors that I really absolutely loved the first time and even more the second time is the two factions' interactions with each other of the Fellowship and the Coriani. So even, and this is not spoiler, it happens in the first chapter. Right off the bat, chapter 1, we're in Sethfir's head. And he's with Luhane, and he has to send a signal to bring back Karadman. And you see the full interactions of how they work together, how Sethfir, the warden, is connected to all of the lanes and all the powers of the world and how that works. That one, just reading it again, I didn't enjoy Sethfir as much as I should have the first time, but on my reread, I realized that I just love him to death. He's probably one of my favorite of the Fellowship. And then the Coriani, we see the power that they can possess. We see a little bit of that, and we'll talk about that in the spoiler section. And also the desiring plans and the conniving of Moriel, of she'll go to any lengths to get what she wants, and her schemes are just growing in proportion to what the story is going to bring. So be on the lookout for those. But those are what stood out to me, and I loved it on the second reread as well.
Niko?
She's not hollow. What she's protecting is not hollow. So you read this in this section and you go, she'll do anything to get what she wants. Watch what the moral high ground is, because it will unfold as this series moves forward and goes on. So that's what's so much fun, is you start at a shallow level and you just go, oh, this is just a villainous character. This is fun, until it isn't fun, because you can see more of what is actually going on from their point of view.
Yeah, actually, I had a question. Maybe we will discuss that in the spoiler, because it wasn't clear to me while reading the book. Maybe one of you can clarify. Obviously, Janny can clarify, but that will be in the spoiler section regarding what the Corianis are doing. Niko, you want to add some points in here?
Yeah, it's a lot of great stuff that I definitely would mention as well, brought up. And so to go for the other thing, which I feel like for me, unsurprisingly, was just one of my favorite things about this book, was Arathon. And not just Arathon, but the way that in Ships of Barrier, we did the same thing too, just in different ways. But not only are we experiencing things with him, but we're learning more about him and other characters through their interactions with him, through their interpretations of him. You know, we obviously see that a lot with Dakar as well, but even, you know, there's other characters, other just people, and seeing how they react to him, what they know about him, what they think about him, and seeing all of the things he's trying to do. And, you know, Jan, you said ends justifying the means being kind of one of the big central themes, which very, very much shows too, because it's Arathon with just his tortured poet's soul, trying to do what he has to do, but trying to do it in the way that's going to cause the least harm to anybody else. And his compassion being used in a way I don't think I've ever seen compassion used in a story either. And so I was pretty sold with Arathon, especially. Really liked in book one, but with Ships of Mirror and then Warhost of Vastmark, I'm completely on board the Arathon train. And so getting to see all of that, I did love the scheming as well. Just going to the more humorous nature, the scheming with the ransom, I'll say very vaguely, was fantastic. And I really enjoyed that on like the lighter side too. But yeah, definitely all the deep emotional trauma that you're putting on people. I enjoyed.
Yeah, there is some humor in this one. There's definitely room for humor. The funny thing is that if you go back to book one and you read Halleran's take on Arathon, he pegged it in book one. He said, most people will not understand this prince, and most of the ones who don't will be his friends. It's right on the page, but you just sail right by until it kicks your teeth out. That's the fun part of this series. If you do miss anything, don't worry. It's going to come around again, just like missing the pelt. It's going to spin around and knock you off the horse, and it will happen again and again until you get knocked off the horse. And how much you're able to deny what you're actually seeing on the page is how far you'll go before you get that knock in the face that knocks you off the horse. So this is kind of fun for me because there's so many new readers here on the ground floor. I kind of got to put duct tape over my mouth. But at what point in these discussions are you going to get knocked off the horse? Because there it was on the first book. Most people are not going to understand this prince, and the ones who are going to understand the worst are the friends. It's right there. Yeah. Right there. So yeah, the scheming, the use of cleverness to combat. What do you do when you're faced with this massive war and you don't have the ability to get the main street to fight it? And how do you stage this? Where do you stage it? What people do you want to get involved? And if you look forward past Warhost, what happens to that culture, that tribal culture in those mountains that was impoverished and being eaten alive by middlemen? There's a big change that happens due to this war. So the price is paid, but change. Each arc is going to change things. It isn't going to be the same old. People say, oh, we've read everything we know about this conflict. Not when the moral ground underneath of it changes, or the societal aspect changes, or you discover something about a society and it opens up and it makes you think differently about what's actually happening. There comes a point you're not in Kansas anymore, but it's going to happen slowly and subtly. So part of my frustration is more readers on the ground who have finished this that can see the whole sweep, because it's massive. And the final volume will just kick all the last puzzle pieces in place, and you'll go, oh my God. I can't wait for you to get there. It's really cool.
Yeah. I think for me,
pulling out the cleverness and the scheming, that's huge.
Yeah. I think for me, I agree with every point that all of you discussed here. All the auxiliary characters, they get this wonderful arc. I think for me, more than Arathon and Lysair, for me it were the auxiliary characters like Dakar and Talit and the Brydion brothers, and their arcs are so good. And I am a huge fan of mystery and thriller genre, and this book actually gives you that also, right? Sometimes things happen just like how it happens in a thriller book, and that was so satisfying for me as a huge thriller fan as well. All these things that come out of nowhere when you're least expecting it, and it really pleasantly surprises you, right? And these scheming that has happened in the background that you had no clue about, and you are like thinking, okay, they are done, they're gone, we are losing it, and then something suddenly happens and take you by surprise. So that's what this book was for me: enjoyable, thoroughly, at the same time sometimes traumatic, like I said earlier before we went live, that some scenes were really traumatic, especially that scene where the whole mountain or that whole area goes down and sinks. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm spoiling stuff here. Shall we get into spoiler already?
Let's do it. Why not? Yeah.
I took geology courses to write that scene. I literally took
Really?
geology, college level geology. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You look at the map on this and you'll see mountains and you'll see rain shadows. There's all kinds of things in this map that are geologically correct, including the
Wow.
fault lines, which we'll get to later. You'll see later. But there's just little things in this book that you need to put a tick mark and check. One is the little guy that's the steward on the boat. The guy who's the cook comes from the desert culture and has a little bit of a peppery temper. Watch those people. Watch that.
Okay.
So there's little things that you're going to go, oh my God, later when you see what's underlying, because there are no little characters in this series that don't connect to something major. They still may be a spear carrier, but they connect to something major. But yeah, I hope people see the humor. That moment where Dakar is sitting there saying, how do you know that Talith isn't seasick? And Arathan says, I've been watching the cook. And obviously she's eating. The cook knows she isn't seasick. So, the little moments where it's going over Dakar's head, but there are other characters that are much more tuned in to what's happening than the one that's writing on the page. So that skew of perspective really plays in this series everywhere. It plays everywhere. So yeah, I know Paul was asking me about certain things that he saw. And I said, it's there on the ground floor if you look carefully. It's right in your face.
Yeah, and now having read, Janny was kind enough to send me the shorts connected with the Wars of Light and Shadow series, and I've read all but one because it's not supposed to be read at the juncture at which I am in the series. Wow, did that just totally blow my mind about some of the implications that she hinted at, she kind of teased at. I don't want to pull too much on this because, especially if you haven't read those books, we're going to be having a discussion about the Gallant, one of the shorts. So that was just heart ripping.
Yeah, well, you're finished with Arc 3. When you finished Warhost, you're pretty safe with the short stories. It'll shift your view of the world because you'll see certain things a little sooner. The story will involve it eventually, but you'll have a wider grasp of where you stand. The Gallant shows a time period when the society is breaking but isn't fully broken yet. It's thoroughly broken here. So there's aspects, and I know people say, well, you got to read the series first, but actually I've had people who were romance readers read the Gallant, and they read it and they were fine with it, not having read the series, because it's pretty self-contained. Yeah, if you've read the series, you'll see more into it. On the other hand, if you haven't read the series, when you start with Curse of the Mistwraith, you'll see a lot more into Barry. So the shorts are pretty safe after you finished Arc 3. If you want to wait one more book, then you probably won't be spoiled with too much, but I would definitely avoid Black Bargain until the finish of Storm Fortress, because the events in that are not apparent in the series until you finish Storm Fortress, and then that will dovetail really beautifully. It won't kill you if you read it. You'll just see things in advance. But it might mean more after that period, after that book is done. The shorts are not available on e-formats anywhere on Amazon. You got to get them off my website, off the web store, on my studio store, because I didn't want to fling short stories into the big wide world, until I want to bundle them together a little tighter and make a contiguous anthology. But they're all available, and they were issued in paper anthologies, except the Gallant. That's the only one you cannot get in a paper anthology.
I was gonna say, yeah, because I was looking at the site and I'm like, okay, it says this one is you can read after this book and like this one after this one. So you were really, really helpful with where you can actually read them. So yeah, I'm planning on reading all of those once I get to that point of where it's okay to do. Because I'm especially interested in the Sundering Star. I know.
Ooh.
Ooh,
Oh
God.
yeah. Oh yeah.
All of them blow the bottom
Oh
out
yeah.
of what
Oh,
you
yeah.
assume. And often that was why I wrote them, because readers would oversimplify the history so badly.
Oh,
They would
yeah.
just oversight. Oh, they started a feud on Dawson Eller and it just happened like that. No, it was a 75-year. That's in my FAQ section, but watch out. If you get in there, there will be stories. So yeah, I wrote like 6 pages of history as to how that original feud began before Curse of the Mistray started. So the shorts open up the complexity, and it's way broader than people assume. And I won't say too much. We're talking about Warhost, but you're pretty safe reading 5 of them right now. Pretty safe.
I was going to say, you definitely have the hints in there as well. I caught, that was one of those things, such a, they're usually smaller offhand things. It's not like crazy important lines, but especially when the fellowship is talking and the little comments that imply there's a lot of a bigger world out there. That's always something I enjoy too, with really elevating, fantasy series where there's so much more going on. And so it's like I've caught some of those things. So then when I went and I was looking at the short stories, I'm like, ha, I was right, at least with some of this. And so that's why, I need to get those off the site still, and read them. I'm really excited to do those as well.
This world is absolutely massive. You're only seeing the very, very tip of the iceberg. You have absolutely no idea how much material is underlying this story, both in the future after this series is over and into the far, far past, even into the universe of the far, far past. There is so much more coming. And, it's fun because when you read Warhost, it's all there. It's all there, but in ways that your eye isn't trained to see it yet. So it's fun. It's really fun to watch as it unwinds. It's like for people who are coming in off a series like Malazan took the Battle of Pale at the very beginning of the very first book, and it took the whole pie and threw it on the table and smashed it. And no holds barred, everything was there. But you spend 10 books putting it all together and figuring it out, all the pieces and where they come from. This book does the opposite. It starts with a filament, one little silk thread that runs through the entire series, and it twists into a massive rope until you see the whole picture. So you're learning it as the character goes. And that's part of why it's such a sleeper, is people read it and they go, oh, just another European fantasy. Oh, this is European aristocracy. Oh, this is just a monarchy. They have no idea. Bayers serve for life. High Kings usually only 4 years was the average. Whoa, what? It's not what you think. And so that little silk filament of those characters carrying all the way to the finale of the series, you will see the entire world, but it will not build as one pie that you have to figure out. So you can't even see what's truly at stake in volume 1 until you've read volume 11. Then you look at volume 1 and suddenly it's a whole different story, because you will see every tension point at play that the characters don't know yet.
It's funny that you mentioned Malazan, because I was actually going to make that comparison in a similar way and just say that's something too that and obviously, and I've read all of Malazan, and it's one that, it is a masterwork, but it's also not the easiest to read and get through, is how I experienced it. And so I think the method you go, the fact that you're able to fit in so much, and I know like at finishing Warhost, I know is barely scratching the surface, but even then there is so many little things, little pieces, hints about, the ancient past, hints of other worlds, hints of all kinds of things going on, and able to fit that in and also have it still feel like an incredibly character focused, like intimate story. It's balancing on that line, I think, is what has just made these so amazing to read, because you feel like you're reading this intimate character story, but it's just set in a mammoth of a world where every little consequence is vastly relevant, and it's I can't imagine trying to write something and have that all come together like this. And so very, very different style than Malazan, where it's just like, we're going to throw everything at you immediately, like you said, and you kind of figure it out from here. Here it's that kind of slow reveal. So you find out stuff a little bit later, but I think it really sucks you in and like hooks you, and then you just find out more. And ultimately, I've been having a much more like positive experience reading these so far, just getting sucked in and then finding out more and more. And so it's yeah, I think it's done so wonderfully well, the way you've woven those elements.
One thing to pay attention to, and this is one of the vast difference between this series and many of the other bigger epics. In book 1, you are told that the match does not cross the threshold. You're invited. You aren't told things unless you ask. The major powers in these books walk very, very softly. And they don't volunteer what they're doing. They don't volunteer what they're thinking. They don't volunteer how powerful they are. They don't volunteer what they know. So they're pretty easily dismissed. Watch for that one, because that's said right on the first page practically, that the ways of power is you don't flaunt it. So in a series like Malazan, where the elder powers are all over in your face and interfering with people's lives, you will see that later, but it will come up in the 5th arc. But it's there. It's there. You go back to book 1, you go, oh my gosh, look at this. Look at this. There they are. They're standing right in front of you, doing their thing right in front of your eyes. But if you didn't ask, or the characters didn't ask, or you didn't know, or in the case of Arathon, he's a bit trained here. He's not necessarily going to volunteer everything he's seeing either. So there's that subtlety. You could walk right past the mystic and never know. In this world, they don't volunteer their secrets. They don't, the guy that's sitting the furthest away from the campfire saying nothing is probably the one who's most aware of what's happening. So watch for that one too. If you want the little things to kind of look for, because the sweeping events are so big, they run over you, but the little stuff is where the big action maybe is sitting. And you'll see it. You'll see it as time goes on.
So Chibipo has I think it's a quotation from the book. Don't mistake me for your husband, lady. I've never loved a weakness that can be nurtured into dependency. I remember reading that and I'm like, wow, that was a nice comeback. And Blaise, you wanted to share passages and from the books. Would you like to go ahead now?
Absolutely. So the one section I was talking to the panel before we went live that really struck me with Warhost, it was in chapter 3 titled Vastmark. It was Arathon and Dakar trying to save the little girl Jillith, who was just, for lack of a better term, mauled by the wyvern. And they're trying to save her. So I just wanted to read like not a short passage, but as much as I can about it. So this is on page 134 of Warhost. Tied by the strictures of his training to the law of major balance, the child he sought to help possessed sole volition to close the first step, to open within her the conduit, to enable grand conjury, to empower her to thwart death. Jillith would have to embrace change, her willful young nature and the pull of heedless passion that urged her to go her headstrong way must yield to wisdom beyond her years and development. She must of herself be encouraged to accept the loving boundaries that skilled parents would instill upon offspring too young to protect themselves. To recover and rise whole, a 6-year-old must unmake the decision to flout her brother's care and run off to play along among the rocks. Jillith heard the question that was asked of her, enfolded in every protection of Master Bard's music, could draw to set her outside pain and suffering. Her spirit shimmered in playful rebellion. She would dance and court danger, even as her lost mother, who had cruelly abandoned her in childhood, who had ventured out on the unsafe footing and to save a stranded lamb and perished in the grinding thunder of a rock slide. And then a little later, this is on page 137, it says, for Jillith, the turning had already laid behind. She was a wayward creature, heart set to go where she would, and for that she had met with Orion. Her choice was made in the wreckage of pride and the tatters of past pain. Arathon had no recourse left but to force back the semblance of dignity. He bent his head over wet knuckles and threw himself back into music to loose his bard's bindings one by one and play the lost child through her transition out of life. He guided her last breaths in joy and peace to ease final passage in cherished sympathy. Uh, just reading that back, I'm just getting emotional about Arathon trying everything he can to save this child, and he does that. It's not mentioned in the passage, but him and Dakar, they actually join in trying to do this this act of healing. And in that joining, Dakar sees into Arathon's past and his empowered I don't know what the trait for compassion and sympathy. And he realizes that Arathon is not trying to put him down or anything at all. He's pointing out the weaknesses in Dakar, and he's incapable of feeling like immense amounts of anger and pain. He's always trying to save people and see the good in people, and that's a change for Dakar, and you see it throughout the rest of the book, especially in the ending, which I'm sure we'll get through. That passage, it just melted my heart. Even reading it again just now, I'm like, wow. When you read something out loud, I think your mind does another racing part of it. Yeah, that passage. And then there's some other ones, but I'll let other people talk as well.
It's a moment in the book where you see the really grinding hardship of the law of the major balance, which is mentioned in volume 1. The law of the major balance says you do nothing with another consciousness without permission. Free will is everything. You don't override free will. So to let that child go or force her to stay, they would have had to override free will to force her to stay. And so many times people who are ill, it's such a complex issue. It's so hard to understand the impact of a major event on a person's life. What makes them choose what they do? What makes some people refuse a treatment? What makes people hang on past the point where suffering has taken away everything they had? It's such a personal issue. And so, yeah, you have a 6-year-old child that can't unmake her nature. She lost her mother because her mother did the same stupid thing. So why should she listen? And that moment of Arathon having to let go because of the law of the major balance. Now, I would expect the reader to be fully 100% sucked into that scene as they're meant to be. But if you look at that scene as staging and you look at other powers on this world that adhere to that law of the major balance and that moment of free will, how many decisions have the Fellowship Sorcerers had to make where they could not override? And I could go further in, but I don't want to get into Arc 3 stuff where you understand the dynamics of why the situation of the politics or the social structure, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The governmental and social structure of this world, you don't understand at this point. You will. But yeah, that microcosm scene with that little girl can be macrocosmed out through the whole series, and watching how these characters have to choose or not choose because they're deaf to it. They don't honor free will, and they'll step right through it, figuring means to the end or whatever reason why they don't follow that rule.
And that was the
that was the foundation for a major point that was made earlier also, but it stepped it up here. It stepped it up a major step and a major layer.
Yeah, and that scene broke me too. I couldn't read it without tearing up. And especially, as a father, and there was just so many connotations in that scene. But yeah, I do want to pull quickly on the free will thread that Janny's pulling on. That it made me think so much about my faith and what I believe about. And whether you have a faith or a non-faith, or regardless of what your faith is, I think for those of us who do, we often think of, is God or gods or whatever we believe in, goddesses, etc., whatever they are, do they have the ability to simply, chart our course with impunity, or do they allow us free will to a certain extent to do certain things? And that really played what reading that scene really got into my head. Like I sat down for an hour after reading it and just, I couldn't stop thinking about that aspect. And that's what Jenny's writing will do to you. It will get into your head and it will start, you thinking about all kinds of things that, yes, of course, related to the book and related to, the overarching themes, and but it will get into your head and make you think about things perhaps, that you never pondered before. And that was what that scene did to me. So
Well, it's even the approach to the healing and to some other uses of the magic. Like, how often do you see in a book or something like, oh, for me to use my magic, or like, if we do this, you'll like see a part of my soul or something, and it's just a throwaway line. Nothing happens. You're like, oh, and they saw. Like, no, like this, it's real here, and it's something that just gets you deep into the minds and the psyche and just the depths of these characters, seeing them have to interact in this way and entwine and have nothing hidden at all. And there's several powerful moments doing that where it's healing is being done, or there's something else being done, and people are really able to see deep down into what's going on. You of course have that with Dakar and Arathon and that scene as well, and just the way it's such a dynamic, because it's not only just the fact that it's it's sad, it's this young girl who's injured, they're trying to save her, but there's nothing they can do, but it's also those two having to like face each other, and Dakar like seeing deep into Arathon and how that affects him. And it's the way that has been set up. It's just, I don't know that I've read anything else ever that gets you that deep into characters' minds. And that's what makes it feel like such an intimate story, like these people, because we're just scratching the surface of so many things with the world, but we've gone so deep into these characters while having this really engaging plot and all kinds of things going on. It's just, I can't help but just want to just keep going more with it.
You'll get more. Don't worry. There's more coming.
I can't wait.
I'm still, when it comes to, there's a lot of things I want to, there's so many things I want to say about this book that, but I want to mention 3 quick things. One, Jenny, when you read the shorts, because these novellas are shorter, the gut punches are just that much more impactful, because they occur over this narrow time frame. It's just, and she keeps doing this, and I just when I think I'm not going to have another emotional peak and valley, she does it again. And what I want to point this particular point to is relating again, and I said this in the previous discussion with the previous book, is she does this to me one more time. I wasn't prepared for it with Diego, and I did not like this dude, right? I was like, yep, hopefully it gets taken off the board. And she made me cry tears over his death and the pathos. And of course, to top it all, he dies in the arms of essentially his counterpart, right? Like the things that Janny Wurts does, how could she make me care about this guy who I think is arrogant? He's feel to Lyser. That's probably his best quality for me. Like he's just, she's making me care about this guy, right? And it's and thinking back to, in the circumstance of his death, making me look back and thinking, oh, well, I should have paid more attention to him and his arc and what he represented and his positive traits, except I don't know how she did it. But
haven't you ever had that experience when somebody died and you go, oh my gosh, I missed what they were all about, but their friends talk about them and you go, oh my gosh, I missed everything. I missed it all. It was right in front of me. I had the opportunity, but I missed it all. That happens a lot. It happens a lot in life. And, I would say if there's a cautionary tale there, if there's a character you hate in these books, watch out.
Yeah, because I was.
You're going to trip on it. You will trip on it.
Yeah, and he did to me again. I was ruined when he died, and I was ruined. And this is something that, and it's my own fault in a way, that there's nothing in these books you can't pay attention to. You can't absorb all the material and pay attention to everything because it is so deep and it's so immersive. You can't catch every detail. You won't. But if you don't pay attention to certain things, you're going to be messed up, completely messed up.
Well, that's why the prose style is written with that precision and that density, was because if you don't slow down enough to really see what's on the page, you will miss it. And people do try to skim and they bounce right off. If I see one more person say purple prose, because actually it's precise, you just don't understand why you're being shown this detail yet. And if you're impatient, okay, skip off and go read something else, because this book isn't for you. This book is made to be experiential, not just a story, not just a piece. Yes, it will be a story. Yes, it will entertain you, but you're going to come away with an experience. It will alter how you perceive things and how you think about things at its best. But you can also read it at a more shallow level. So it was written in a very precise way to make you slow down, so you do start to see details, because we erase details in our daily lives all the time that could literally have saved a situation if we had been listening or paying attention. And so it's transcendent fantasy. Whoever coined that, they hit it just right on the nail. It's also about critical thinking. It's also about seeing other perspectives and the ability to not hold a belief so strongly that you're unable to change that perspective when it kicks your feet out from under you. Because if you get up with that same belief and you keep walking, it will destroy you. But if you can get up back on your feet and re-examine that belief and shift what you think about it, then you've evolved, okay? You haven't revolved back into the same chair and the same shoes, the same situation. You have evolved to something that's capable of seeing more. And these books are about evolving, not revolving. And people miss that because so many books are very linear.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. Sorry, go ahead.
I will say, oh, sorry, I was going to say, I will say your prose is beautiful, though. And your descriptions, even in Cycle of Fire, which is a very different style, there'd be sometimes I'd read a paragraph of description and I'd just have to stop and read it again because it was just wonderful. And that's, I know some people who are really, they like elevated prose. And so I just would like flip to a random spot in one of your books and read a paragraph of description, and they'd be like, okay, yeah, I need to read this. So it's like, yeah, completely get the intentionalness. And I do think these are books that you need to read slow. And it does kind of make you because of the way that it's written. So I think that's very effective, but it is, I mean, it's definitely functional, but it's also just beautiful with the way that you write things. The descriptions, and that's another thing I just enjoy while I'm reading it. And I sit back, and I was gonna try and like grab some of my favorite passages, but there was just too many. Because that's why I literally started flipping to a random page. I'm like, it probably doesn't matter what page I flip to. I'm gonna find something wonderfully just beautiful here. So like that's what I started doing when I was like giving people an example of how it reads.
Well, flag them as quotes on Goodreads. That, believe it or not, helps.
Yeah,
you see that crop up. So just flag them.
I have the same problem, Niko. I usually try to put at least one quote from Janny's books in my reviews. And how do you choose, right? Like, I can't, without rewriting the whole book out. It's just, her prose is just, I've never read anything like it. And as you so aptly point out, it is so evocative that, and I get it. Not everyone wants, as you said, elevated prose, right? But the experience when you finish a book like that, the way you feel about language, the way you feel about books, it just totally re-energizes your love of reading and literature, and just for pure enjoyment, right? And yes, it's heavy. You're dealing with some heavy themes and some heavy topics, and there's a lot to absorb. But just if you just think about the language alone, yeah, so captivating. It's just astounding. But yeah, I just want to quickly say those other two things that, Talis, going back to characters, Talis' character helped me understand Lysier better, because I started to see, now that she kind of had her own almost page time to herself, shared with on the screen with Erathon, obviously, but seeing a lot of her traits and qualities that were somewhat of a mirror of Lysier, and as Jenny pointed out, how she uses her beauty, her being sensuous and seductive. It's like Lysier. It's the same sort of. I began to see how they were a good match in a lot of ways, and their selfishness as well. That inner selfishness and that inner belief that even though they think they're doing it for the right reasons, it's all about them. I very much saw that in her, and I really start to understand Erathon better for the first time in the book through Dakar, right? For the first time, and not that it wasn't there before, but for me, this was the moment where through Dakar specifically, I understood so much more about Erathon, and that's something now that a few books in, I'm starting to pay more attention to, of how the auxiliary characters truly help us understand the two main ones. It's now, it's really truly coming to me how Jenny's done that. So anyway, sorry, I'll be quiet. I'm talking too much.
Fantastic thoughts. So I couldn't agree more with a lot of what you said.
So yeah, you mentioned being a parent. How did you react to the twins? The fate of the twins in this book, Phelan and Thearch, and the widow, the overprotective mother.
What's the word I'm looking for? So now I'm a grandparent too, Janny, and I'm going to say that parenthood is, for those of you who are, it's a weird thing. It really is. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's a weird thing. And Jenny has written some characters in The Wars of Light and Shadow that, like, to me, if you ask me to list all the themes, parenthood and taking care of your children and what you do for them to protect them and how that wouldn't be one of the ones that would initially come to mind. But when you consider specifically what Jenny's talking about, I believe that, and I write about this myself. This is one time probably in this podcast I would talk about my writing, is that the worst of people and the best people, it's certainly the worst. If they care about nothing else, they probably care about their kids, right? And as parents, we do things that we believe are the best for our kids. Most of us, that's what we try and do. That we may be wrong, but there's normally no one there to tell us that we're wrong. There's no one there to tell us that we've made a mistake. And those things only manifest, those outcomes only manifest usually far into, when the children sometimes are adults. So for me as a parent, I think a lot of parents would agree, you're always second guessing yourself about if what you did was for the benefit of your children and ultimately the best thing for them, or something that's for you, right? And that's always like front and center, I think, as a parent. And that is what, without getting too emotional, that is what came out to me in that aspect of writing. And I can't even, a lot of this book fills me with a lot of emotion, and it's hard to, like Blaise was talking about when Erathon let the child go, that really hit me, but what Jenny's talking about hit me more.
That's another one of those arcs with the side characters that has some huge impacts, and the way it's woven around to be incredibly important to the plot and to the characters as well. But it's another piece of learning more about and understanding character, in this case Erathon, between the interactions. We see how he is with the children. We see how he is with their mother, but then we see the change in the mother and how she feels toward him, because she, thinks her kids are being taken away from her and she wants to keep them safe. And then we have the ex-soldier involved too, and it's just that that whole mix of different reactions. And it's just like, man, nobody's really wrong here. Like you can see everybody's viewpoint. It's so hard. And that's something that the series does so well too, because you don't get away with just being like, oh, this person's evil, you're supposed to hate them. It's like, even if this person's evil, we're going to look at why, and we're going to make you understand so you can't just do that. And like, especially from book one, like part of me wants to hate Lysair, but I can't hate Lysair because I've grown to understand him, and I've had to see even Arathon understand him. And it's just like, it's so hard to hate a character like that, like you would get in most books when you get that kind of depth.
But as a parent, you're supposed to be right. And this is the thing about specifically Arathon when it comes to children in general. Any children that I've seen connected with him loosely or more closely is that his compassion allows him, he doesn't have children of his own, but his compassion allows him to see things about the children, and it's not, and especially in this period where he's lost his gift, right? In a period where he's lost his gift, right? He has that emotional intelligence, and he's not yet a parent, to understand what's good for these children. And like I said, as a parent, you're all supposed to be right. You're all supposed to be the one that knows best. You're all supposed to be the one that has the vision for your kids. And Arathon is that person that he sees so broadly, and he has this compassion, and he's someone who, all I can say is, you would trust with your kids. You would trust him with, even though he's not the parent, with knowing what's best, right? And that's, that really affects me about
the scene where what becomes of those kids, or the moment where Arathon lets the kids make their own point. He lets the kids make their own point. He knows that nobody can argue with a parent. He makes the parent see the child. And that was the arrangement. But it goes back to that scene where he literally teasingly kidnapped that widow and shoved her on the boat and took her away for a 2-week sail. And there was a moment in that period where there was a parity between those two characters until she pushed him and asked about his criminal background, asked about everything. And he turned around and he said to her, look at the deeds. Don't look at the rumors. Don't look at the opinions. Don't look at where have I actually caused harm to you? And she realized she crossed the line and there was no coming back. There was that moment, that break. So there's so many microcosmic scenes that you could almost forget, because this isn't the big battle. This isn't the huge, it's just a little scene, a little moment. But it's a little moment where a character makes a fatal mistake. And it's a relatively unimportant character, considering how much power that widow wields. Not too much, just the power over her kids. But you will see that same kind of dynamic play where the stakes are way larger. So watching that moment where his trust goes and it's gone, and what causes that trust to break, it'll be signal. And it's something, like you said, this book lets you begin to see the character, but you're not going to really see into that character until Peril's Gate.
Yep.
We'll get into the gears in Peril's Gate. So yeah, there's so much in this book going on, and yet
Give me chills.
you know.
I just had chills.
Peril's Gate will give you chills. I can promise you that.
I just had chills.
I
You've
had
been
to stop.
saying that since.
I had to
Yes.
stop after Peril's Gate and write Hell's Chasm just because I was in emotional shreds, and there was a reason. It's a powerful moment of. It's a moment.
You wrote Hell's Chasm. Hell's Chasm destroyed me. Hell's Chasm destroyed me. It's still my favorite book of all time, but anywhere, number one, period. And you know why? But it destroyed, like,
Well,
Wow.
Perils Gate was a weird moment because for me at Perils Gate, everything fell apart. That was when the big merger happened between Avon and HarperCollins. That's when I lost my contract in the US due to that merger and they cut the list. That's where I essentially vanished from the scene completely. I wasn't being edited anymore. That's why there's a slight style shift. I had to do everything myself from there forward. So it was an emotional, just completely, everything shattered. Everything shattered and menopause, everything hit. And it was a ghastly time in my life. And so I finished that book in emotional pieces. And there were many people at that point because they couldn't see the second. That's the hinge point of the series. Okay. It's really going to open up after Perils Gate. Huge, enormous. Nobody realized what was coming. And I did. And of course, the readers reading it as it was coming out on the ground were like, oh, yeah, well, where's it going to go from here? And we'll talk about that book when we get there. But I knew what was at stake if the series stopped there and I couldn't continue. So I wrote that standalone novel to show the readers that I have control of this massive series. It was designed to be a long work. I can stick it home. I can create a story and finish it. I have a plan. The second half is going to be a different shape than the first half. And hopefully maybe that book was supposed to get me another US publisher. Well, the economy crashed in 2008. Nobody was buying anything. Everything froze. So it didn't happen the way I'd hoped. So it was an emotional break. It was a break to put something out there for the readers. It was a chance to try my hand at getting a new contract in the US. It failed. So yeah, it was an interesting period that those stories came out at the same time. But yeah, I had perfect control of what was happening in Perils Gate. I have perfect control of what's leading up to Perils Gate in Arc 4. The payoff is in Storm Fortress for all of it. And it really starts to happen in Trader's Knot because that tipping point, it's the tipping point for the series too. So I was like shattered because I said, if this series doesn't go forward from here, nobody will have a clue as to why it was even written. You're still on the ground floor. Why is it written is all in that second half. And that's where the frustration of things falling out of print just crushes me because this series needs to be read end to end and have a chance. Yeah. And when pieces of it get dropped out or pieces of it or there's a long break between publication or whatever, it's very hard to maintain the momentum. And that's why I'm so grateful for this discussion today, is because it's actually bringing to light what was planned in this volume that's going to be built on huge later, just massively huge. You have no idea yet. And if you think I'm just blowing steam out my ears, Blaise will tell you. You think you got Stuart and Warhost, wait till you see.
So I have a very, it's not a technical question, but something that I didn't understand in the book, or maybe I missed it. So why does the Koreani women, the priestess, they want to kill Arithon? Did I miss that? Or is it a mystery still?
They have a big problem with him. They have a huge problem with him right from the start. And I can't say too much because there's ties to Enithan Tour, the little old wise lady who lived in the attic, the little seeress in book 1. Mm-hmm. That's going to come back and bite you. There's history, huge history there that you have not seen yet. They want to be able to see into him. He's trained to power, and they aren't going to be able to see into him. And he's going to be a signal power in the world, and they can't control it. So that's their initial issue, but there's more. And I won't say a word because you have no idea how much more. There is a moment in, I believe it's Warhost, or the ending of Ships. I'm not sure precisely where it falls, where Moriel, who's very, very old, you have no idea what she's protecting. She's extended her life way past the point where she should have died. She's desperate for a successor, and she can't find someone capable to transfer that power to her. And Sethvir feels sorry for her because of that. He knows. So you'll see these moments, these odd insights that indicate there's more going on here. But she actually sees a future She sees a future where he's going to destroy them. And there's where you missed it.
Yeah.
That breaks into a twofold dynamic. She sees that he's going to destroy them, but there's more to who he is. When you understand where the Coriathane are coming from and how they acquired their power, they're acquisitive. They take power wherever they can get it. So the conflict that's starting to build here is they really want him dead, but they also want to suck his brains. So watch for it. That's a little bit of big red flag that you might not have missed. So you probably missed the forecast where she saw.
Yeah. I remember that part, but I just wanted to, but it wasn't clear why exactly she wanted to kill him. Maybe, but now I understand. Okay. But
No,
I
you
remember
don't.
that scene.
No, you don't. You have the pinhole view through the paper.
I believe that happened in Warhost, Janny. It's
Warhost.
after.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
after.
Before she sets out to assassinate him.
Yeah, I think it's after Moriel gets the waystone back
Yeah.
from Zephyr, and she
Yeah.
does the screaming, and then she sees into the future, and then she has the assassination plot, which also builds up into the ending, which is I'm sure we're gonna talk about because
Which
with
is
Dark Hearts.
also there's two folds there. She sees that, and she also sees that Arathon hits a weakness in her order. Enchantresses who get too close to him get changed. They get changed in ways that are not going to be good. And so you will see that build also, but there is a massive history you don't even know yet. So there's many onion layers that you got to peel. The simple one did come out in Warhost, and that was that she forecast that he would destroy her succession. And when you come to understand what that actually means, a lot of what she's doing right now will make sense. It won't now. You say, oh yeah, she'll just do anything to get what she wants. Well, you don't see her moral high ground yet. When you do, you might think twice about, well, was she justified? Was she not justified? In other words, be careful when you hate a character, or be careful when you think they're just evil. Because
I learned that with Dark Hearts.
down at that core, there may be something there that was truly noble.
We're learning, Jenny. We're learning. You're teaching me the hard way.
I've been trying to stop talking so much, let other people talk, but it's just you saying that too, though. It really brings for me, because especially in Arc 2, it's where for me I start really questioning and not at all trusting the Fellowship, because it starts to become more and more clear that they see themselves as like the ultimate. Yeah, I know you can't say anything, and I know, but
I can't either.
Careful of the characters you love, because you might hate them, and then you'll hate them, and then be careful because you still don't know. You do not know what is driving the Fellowship. You don't have a clue yet. So yeah, go ahead, hate them all you like, have fun.
Well, and it's like, and I don't hate them, but I question, because it's they firmly believe that they're doing the right thing, but
Do they?
it's less
Wait a minute.
clear if they
Do
are.
they? Do they?
You're killing me, Jenny. You're killing me.
The law
It
major,
goes
law
back
major
to that
balance.
scene where Dakar is climbing up Rockfell Peak, and he's questioning Caradmon, and he's saying, why'd you spare this prince and not that one? You did an unforgivable thing here. You threw this other guy into jeopardy. And did you catch that? Did you catch what Caradmon said? Oops, maybe we made a mistake. There's much going on than you think. And yeah, the Fellowship would be a brick in your path if you're trying to get to this. And whatever it is that they're doing, which you don't know yet, is in your way. These guys are scary how powerful they are. You really haven't seen that yet either. They're totally shockingly scary how powerful they are. It isn't like, the Lord of the Rings where Gandalf is climbing a tree because he's scared because there are a few wolves coming after him. What's holding these guys in check is the law of the major balance, people. Because they could pretty much carve a swath through whatever they felt like. So the question becomes, who is standing on the moral high ground here, and what does it mean? What does it mean? So you're going to have fun with this. I'm glad you're looking at that. I'm really glad you're questioning them, because you should be. You should be.
Yeah. It keeps happening where it's just, you start to see just the touch of people's motivations, and there's the little hints and the little teases, and it's the Fellowship have one goal, the Koryani have another goal. It's you've got all of these different people doing their different things, and so I think exploring that's going to be a lot of fun. And that was the little tidbit of the very humorous scene where they're going and trying to get the Waystone, and we have like the fake Paravian illusion. It was great and it was hilarious, but then you end that with, they're lucky it was only illusion. Like, what would have, like, if it would have been the real Guardian, like, oh man, things would have mattered. And I'm like, what are you going to do? Like, it was great, it was funny, and now I'm like, well, now I want to know what the heck would really happen if we were dealing with the real Guardian and the Paravians. And there's so many things like that. We're just layer after layer after layer, all of these tiny things that just get my mind racing.
I just want to interject because I didn't fully understand, and I still don't, obviously, but when I read the shorts, that's when I felt the Paravians. Like, I didn't quite understand what it meant to be in contact with the Paravian until I read this short. In terms of, and again, I still don't, but the point where, oh wow, this isn't just
not in Kansas anymore.
Another magical being, and like, this is something very different. I don't want to say too much, but just from what I know, Niko, yeah, it's not.
We'll get there. The series will take you there. You don't.
It wasn't what I thought, and I still don't know what it is, but it certainly wasn't what I thought from just reading the main series.
Oh, they're unicorns.
Right? So exactly. So
the story will take you there. Trust me, the story will take you there, and it will blow what you think you know about this universe into a million shards.
Just to piggyback off of what Niko said. So that scene, there's multiple facets going on. The first one is that Lorenda and her followers of Koryani basically joining powers to try to take down the wards of the tower. And then it shows you the power that Koryani possess. Two, it's how conniving and actually hilarious I found Sethfir. That scene upon my reread solidified my love for Sethfir. He's so he's so powerful. He's in tune, but he has like a kind of a dark sense of humor in that scene. And I just love it. And yes, PL, it will pick up, and you will come around to those scenes with the Paravians. I promise you, we'll be good.
Yeah, I'm just when reading the shorts, like I said, it just really, really, really hit me. And now what I love about my very limited point in the series is that we're starting to see some of these payoffs. Okay, some of the things that Janny's foreshadowing, even on the minor threads, right? Like, I remember, I'm a big romance guy. Taylor, looking back at Taylor specifically, in the beginning, when she was starting to fall for Lysair, she said to herself, at the end of the day, his obsession with taking down Erthon, I can't compete with it. I can't compete with it. As much as I love this guy, as much as he may fall for me, I will never be able to compete with that. And now then when you get to Warhost, you see, right? Can't compete with it. Finally now, because of what's happened, and she's been taken, and what's happened with the ransom, he believes that, she's betrayed him essentially, right? And so it all comes to fruition, right? So that's the other thing I love about, as you go on, all these things that, and like I said, you can't pay attention to everything. I was paying attention to that because that's something that I always focus on. I was watching for that specifically, and then we got there. So so what I love about, as you read all these amazing things that Janny has threaded, all these amazing little pathways, you start to see the payoffs, and you're like, oh wow. Okay, and again, I ain't seen nothing yet, as I know. I'm about to go on to our grand conspiracy, but yeah, that's just
That
another amazing
moment
element.
when Lysair sees that she saw something that wasn't what he wanted her to see about Arathon. And I hope that's a really powerful moment for that character, because he walks out the door. He has to give up the thing in his life that could have changed him, could have turned him, could have weakened him. And he admits to himself, I might be wrong. I might be wrong here. And the cost, if I'm wrong, will be one thing. But what if I'm right? The one chance he might be seeing clearly, he said, can I afford to pay that price? If I admit perhaps I'm wrong, if the odds are 90% I'm wrong, but what if it's 10% I'm right? And she's the one thing that could weaken me. She's the one thing that could make me waver. She's the one thing that would make me not do for the many. See, Lysair always is doing for the many. Arathon is always doing for the one, 101. He's the one-on-one guy. He's in the moment. And the two viewpoints are not necessarily compatible at all. So yeah, that I hope that the wrench isn't just about what happens to Talith and how their marriage breaks, but also Lysair's willing to risk everything, even his own damnation, because what if he's right? He's civilization's only hope. He's the only, according to his knowledge, I'm the only counterbalance to this other character. What if I'm right? And so that is a dynamic. Again, you're going to see that come around again in other ways.
And it's just so, I mean, I keep thinking back to Curse, and I keep thinking back to when Arathon had his his right of succession confirmation thing, and Talith was like, she's looking at his ankles and saying, oh well, those are like felon shackles, right? But she never gets to really confront, get into it, talk to about it. And after that, obviously she starts falling for Lysair, right? And you see now during Warhost, when Arathon scoops her exposure to him, how she feels at the end of it, right? By the time he gives her back, that you always wonder what would have happened if they would have become an item, if Arathon and Talith would have, could she have done the same thing? Would it have been the same result that Arathon, let's just say he fell in love with her, would his desire to protect and his need to protect have been something that she couldn't have competed with, the same way she couldn't compete with Lysair's drive, to destroy Arathon, because he sees himself as the only counterbalance. That really fascinates me. What would have happened?
It's interesting because what changed her mind was the 3 times the mask slipped. And she saw it, and she was in the moment enough to see it. She never had the chance to see that mask slip in the Ateran scenes at all. She couldn't see into him one bit, not even a little. Forgive my internet, it's slow. That's one reason I avoided video before, because it's going to kick out and on. But yeah, she saw the mask slip 3 times. She saw this character absolutely humble himself, or absolutely get cut to the heart when he realized that that widow might take those kids and bend them to another future, that they would hate their lives. She saw 3 times where the mask slipped, and she was perceptive enough to see that. Other characters in the same room missed it. So that's an interesting premise. What would have happened if the mask had slipped sooner? If she had seen differently, but given her background, would she have seen it differently, given her beliefs and her stance at that time? It's funny how we opened this discussion and I said, pay attention to the law of the major balance and which characters are bound to it. And it came around again with the Coriathan and their Great Waystone's been lost for 5 centuries. They don't know where it is. And Sethfir finally said, you never asked. And here she is coming to break the tower. She thinks she can knock down the tower, break the, I'm going to get this Waystone and we're going to do it by force, by God. And she's told, all you have to do is show up at the door and ask. So, small moment, but a massive reveal. If you see that for what it really is, it's a massive reveal. But there's so many massive reveals in this book, you possibly are going to go right by it.
And I go back to what Niko said. I've gone so back and forth now, and in some ways, reading the shorts has even made that more convoluted in my head. If this Korani or the Fellowship, who's bad, right? Who's the good guys, or does that exist? Who's bad, who's good? Does it exist? Because in the shorts, especially one I'm thinking about, I won't spoil. The depiction of the Korani is so sinister, right? And the Fellowship sorcerer that shows up looks like this white knight, right? But yet, then you go back and you read another short, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, no, that's not the way it is. And so it's really tough. I'll tell you, Niko, to especially not understanding the motivations yet, not understanding the entire backstory, the history, what they're all really up to. You understand that the Fellowship had this caretaker role, especially in relation to the High Kings, the Parabians, but yet Janny plays with your head, right? She presents things.
The thing is, you don't have to know these things at this stage. The story's going to play just fine without knowing all these other layers. Just, I know what's waiting for you, and it's a lot of fun. And say it outright. I think in the next volume that the Coriathane are older than the Fellowship of Seven. They are older. So there's a lot more here than you're seeing on the surface.
And I thought I gleaned that from. Sorry, go ahead, Niko.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, because it seems like they're actually from this world, whereas the Fellowship aren't. So that kind of makes sense. But you always feel like the Fellowship are older. I could be wrong on the first part of that. I know the second part, but that's sort of like I just keep getting down this rabbit hole.
All right, because the shorts. I tell her about the shorts. I tell her about the shorts. I thought the same thing.
We are in the third age of Aethera. The third age, the first stage of this era. There are other eras on either side of it. The third age, this era, which is called the era of redemption, began with Ask Gift of the World and the Parabians. That's first stage, year one. The second age began with the Fellowship's arrival. And I won't say how it happened because the story will tell you that. The third age began when the rest of mankind piled in there. And there's another piece I'm not going to mention because it's off. You're going to get your teeth knocked out on that one later down the line. So no, mankind is not native to this world. Never was. There is a lot of history as to how that happened. But just to give you a rough idea, one of those shorts takes place like 10, 15,000 years ahead of age one. 15,000 if you're measuring from the end of the second or the third, depending which year you take, which age do you want to start to go back. But yeah, it's about 10,000 before age one, third in this era.
Yep, these are the things that I'm really excited about. There is this small paragraph on page 27. Which mentions about the Deshtier was created by frightened minds as a weapon of mass destruction. So these kind of small tidbits, I think there was something similar in Ships of Merio, which also I mentioned, where they talk about their ship broke down or the machinery failed. So these kind of small clues, it get me excited.
There's a lot of history here. Yeah, you did see into the bit of it in Ships of Merio when the Fellowship came down on creating weapons, gunpowder, specifically gunpowder.
Sundering
If
Star.
you go back and read that section now, you'll see even more. Each book.
As soon as we're done, I'm going to go out on the website and get every single one of these, the shorts.
One thing I will say about Sundering Star, which is what everyone's referencing, I wouldn't read until after Fugitive Prince, and there's a very specific reason why, and we'll get there when we get there. But
agreed. Agreed.
I'm just saying, Danny's website says Warhost.
It does play a little better after Fugitive Prince, but all it does is make you ants because you go.
It's very, very small.
Because you'll just see into what's happening a little faster. That's all. The shorts are just going to let you see into a few more layers a little faster, but it still won't affect the major events of the book. You'll just see a little bit more of what's going on. It won't be quite as easy.
I'll take the advice and try to be patient, just because I also don't know when I'm going to be able to get through all of these, and I want to keep reading like the whole series, like today or yesterday, really. So lots of stuff is normal.
Each of the stories has a date on it, and I didn't do prequel A, prequel B, because I might slice something in there. So there's a date on each of the stories. So if you can actually put them chronologically and see where they belong. Thundering Star is way, way, way prehistory. It's way prehistory. So that's going to show you a whole other facet. 3 of the stories show how various royal lines survived the uprising. And they will clue you into a little bit of the history of the Mistwraith entry. Black Bargain is off, even though it takes place somewhat simultaneously. It's just going to reveal too many things. And the Gallant is about 100 years odd before this book opens. 100 years, a little more than 100 years. And that's Varian's backstory. And you'll see a great deal more about the world before that rising broke it apart, and before that Mistwraith's conquest broke it apart. So it will give you just a perspective view.
Yeah. See, Janny had sent me something, and she had written a nice post-it on which order to read the shorts.
Oh, nice.
So nice of her.
Yeah.
So nice of her. Yeah.
I feel like there's been, because I read Cycle of Fire first, and Cycle of Fire is another story that it goes a lot deeper than you realize it's going to go at first. So I feel like that's what's primed me to look for a lot of the small things, because there were, some moments in that trilogy where I'm just like, what just happened? Like, there's a specific chapter in book 1, and I know you know exactly what I'm talking about, Janny, but there's a specific chapter. I read it. I literally stopped. I put the book down, and I'm like, what did I just, and I had to go back, and I'm like, oh, okay. And it's just so, I've been watching very closely, and I'm sure there's still a million things I've missed, but that's where I've really been watching closely, because I'm like, I know she's gonna put stuff right in front of me and just have me miss it because it's in there. So I'm so glad I read that first, just because it's primed me. But yeah, I really want to just keep reading. I was trying to wait, but I'm probably gonna just kind of plow forward and just maybe keep notes.
Do it.
I can't wait any longer. Because
coming to the discussion, having seen what's coming, you're going to bring another facet to it that this series really needs it. It doesn't have enough people on the ground that see the whole thing put together. And that's why the talk is not putting it in the class where it needs to be, because it unwinds very slowly. So I don't think reading ahead of where a discussion is ever hurts. You just have to watch where your cutoff points on the book are, because there's so many things you're going to see that the readers just starting in won't. And that's part of the problem why the later books are not reviewed, because you can't say a thing without giving it all away. So it gets harder and harder and harder for the reviewers to actually do a non-spoiling review. It almost can't be done. I know Stefan Rates, he really did a good job of doing it with no spoilers, but it's very, very hard. And it becomes such a brain cracker of not getting excited. You want to talk about what's going to happen next, and you can't, because it will ruin it for the new readers. So we need multiple levels of readership where people do know what's coming and don't, so that, much like Malazan, you don't say the wrong thing in the wrong order.
Can we? I don't know how much time we have, but we're gonna get to talk about the Dakar, right?
I guess I'm dropping off.
And what he did. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in the spoiler section, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. We can. I know Angie's probably chopping. I mean, what this to me was probably, in terms of just the nominal, non-big things going on. This was the one scene that it just stopped me cold. And Dakar, up until that point, we know part of it was obviously a spell, but I like to think it was more than that. His stance towards Arathon as being the enemy and Lysair as being the good and the one he loved and felt this fidelity to. And after the beginning of this book, and after things started turning around for Dakar, and after he saw certain things and was allowed to see certain things, you know, I was ready to almost throw the book at the wall when I thought it was dead. Like, I literally was like, no, he can't, you know, like, he can't die now, right? But that would be a Janny Wurts thing, right? That she would just ruin me like that. But I want to know how everyone else felt about Dakar's sacrifice and that scene. Like, his sacrifice in that scene was for me a really pivotal moment. It is. There's out of so many pivotal moments in this series that brought me this sense of utter, you know, sadness, and like it was just like, I want to know what other people felt about this, because I was just like, he can't die, not now, right? Like, you know.
So yeah, so that scene, Dakar, the whole of arc 2, if you want to go that far into it, but we'll talk specifically just about Warhost. From beginning to end, you see the transformation of Dakar, and not just externally, I mean, who he thinks is like the right person and who he should be backing and who he cares for, but also his internal struggles on, wait a second, especially when he had to bond with Arathon to try to save the little girl, and they ultimately failed. He sees all the inner workings of Arathon and his gift for compassion, and as Janny said, he's all for one. He's not one for one like Lysair is. And and Janny also mentioned that Lysair will take everyone's weaknesses and use it against them. Arathon will point out your weaknesses until you're forced to change. And he realizes his error. And then his prophecy, when he sees the arrow from on behalf of Moriel to kill Arathon, he has to make an intervention. This is the starting point of where Dakar changes in the series, and from a person who you just don't really like. I always thought he was kind of funny, but you don't really like on a personal level, to starting to warm your heart, and it will. You'll see how it turns out in the rest of the series. But it shook me from what transpired in that. And there's also one other little thing, and it's connected. Has anyone else noticed with Dakar's prophecies, like what happens, or like the effects of it? Just something to think about. I'm not going to ruin it if you guys haven't caught that yet, but yeah, that's how I felt.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a complex thing, and that's where too is Dakar is another one of those characters. It's so easy to just like write him off as like, oh, he's just this unpleasant drunk, and then you start to really see more too about him and why he is the way that he is, and the things he thinks about, how he's been used over his life, and so seeing his growth and his kind of change, and him wanting to just so bad that he wants to refuse to believe that there's any good in Arathon as well, and until he's forced to see it. Essentially, it's very, very powerful how it's handled, for sure.
How much did Asandir see on chapter 1 of Ships? You have to ask yourself that question. In other words, Dakar was total scapegrace, dropped the ball, completely was irresponsible, looking after, helping Havish get back on its feet. Asandir sent him to protect Arathon. Really? The one person who's this incompetent, you're going to go protect this guy? And then you realize Dakar does his little thing, running away from it. And who's sent to pick him up? Arathon is sent to pick up Dakar. If you read into those scenes. So you come to this scene at the end of Warhost, Was that really a punishment, or was he being tossed in over his head to freaking learn? How much did Asandir go back? If you go back to the start of ships, how much did Asandir see what he was really doing here? So there's layers on layers on layers on layers and layers at play in every single scene. And yeah, it all came to a head in that one. And that's the start of a shift for this character. So yeah, nobody could see that one coming. That's one of the crowning moments of Warhost. There's so many in that volume, but it's an arc close. Arc closes have that. They have multiple closures that are also beginning points.
You're on mute, Angie.
Sorry. Up until this point, at best, the car is kind of like the comic relief in some ways, and at worst, he's a bad guy. He's selfish. He's this bumbling, philandering, out of shape, drunk, kind of, fumbling, magic user that, does almost by accident does stuff that's good if he does it at all. And yeah, he's funny and he's, this, but this is where, for me, everything changes about the card, who and what he is, right? And I agree with you. It was, you finally realize that, hey, this is all about him seeing Arathon for who he was, rather than, him being actually sent there toward Arathon, because like as Jenny points out, he does a crappy job of it from moment one. So I'm hoping that this arc, part of this, I guess if you want to call it a redemption arc, that this means that he will play a bigger role down the road for the positive. So but I loved, but I'm telling you, man, when I thought that was the end of him, just when he finally had done, I was heartbroken, and I was glad that he was still alive. So
Right. So we are just 13 minutes away from 2 hours mark. So any important points that you want to discuss before we discuss the ending? Because I'm sure Blaise was mentioning that he wants to talk about the ending. So before we get into the ending, any other important stuff that you want to discuss?
Just one quick on mine. This is a small portion of the book, but it will play a bigger portion down the road. When Tharic and Jael, the widow, they escape Lysair, they go into basically a sanctuary of the Ath Adept. And we've heard rumblings about them before, but this is like the first, I believe it's the first time, and Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, that we actually see where they take like where they reside, and the beauty that you write into those scenes when Lysair goes to visit them, and the history behind the Adept are like amazing, and you get a little piece of them. They don't play a part in anything like Athera. But they're the ones, even though they're human, they're the ones like most closely connected to the Paravians, and they have just a huge backstory, and it's going to pay dividends down the road. But I love that scene and seeing where that goes. So that was another part that, especially on a reread, I didn't catch it the first time, but I did now. So
that was one of the other things I wanted to bring up, because that's another thing where it's a small chunk. It's a very small passage, but it feels like it has so much weight. And like there's talk about like the damage that's been done from what Lysair did, and I just feel like that's going to be another one of those things that comes back in a big way later. But yeah, it was such an interesting scene for sure.
It's probably the first time. It is the first time that you see what the Ath Adepts are about, and you're only scratching the surface there. But it's also the first time that you really begin to see the alternate realities and the alternate energy and the alternate. You're starting to see into the depths of some of what makes this world different. You're getting a peek into a little bit of what the older powers can do. Yeah, that's a very significant scene. It was supposed to be a light moment. Here's this guy, he thinks he's walking into a 2-bit church, where you pay your offering at the door and you listen to some mumbo jumbo if you don't happen to believe in it, or you do. And he ends up walking into this totally different experience, and it's shocking. It's like the ultimate working of the major balance. Anything that's constrained is freed. Imagine what that would do if we had that kind of a something on this planet and you could run afoul of it and suddenly everything would change under your feet. All that's in constraint against free will is freed. What would that do? So it's the ground floor here, but watch for that one. It's going to come around again. But yeah, I'm glad you pointed that one out, Blaise, because there are so many scenes like this where it's going to play bigger later. It'll be fun.
Yeah, Erathon mentions to Dakar at the end, near the end of the book, that he's free to choose his own path now. He tells him that specifically, and of course, Dakar chooses to stay with Erathon, and so that free will. Now I'm on to it. I'm of the many things the ball. I feel like I'm trying to keep all these balls up in the air, juggling to try and make sure I don't lose track of what's going on with this, but that's the beauty of the book, right? But yeah, now I'm on to that. I'm on to that.
Well, and it's the whole conversation of free will is also so much more complex than these, because it's an important theme in looking at free will, but we also see, our two main characters how much free will do they really have? Not only are they kind of caught up in prophecy and pulled into this conflict, not only do they have ingrained magical elements to their personalities that force them to be a certain way, basically make it like an integral part of who they are. Not only then do they have a gaze placed on them by the Mist Wraith, it's like all of these different pressures that are put on them, and all of these things that are, at least at the point that we're at, that they really don't have any control over, and seeing how that affects them, how that alters their free will. And then all the while we've got all of these different players that have their own goals, and they have their own things that they want to do in their own, moral high ground, like you said, Janny, a couple times, but there. And so it's all of this, and it's trying to figure out really what's going on. And it's just such an interesting tapestry being woven of all of these different pieces, for sure.
If you take what you just said and you go back to the scene in Curse of the Mist Wraith where Asandir realizes he's got to cut a course through this, because this Fellowship 7 do have an agenda. You will find out. But when he goes up the hill and gives Erathon the pebble and opens the history up that's in that stone, because he knows the decision that's going to be made after that moment, that is a heartbreaking moment. That is a powerful moment when you understand what is actually happening from Asandir's point of view. And it's written in that it's a tragic moment, but I think you're not equipped to really see it. Even though as this character is walking up the hill, everything he's walking past, the plants, the old spirits, all the layers of history are in sympathy with the tragedy that's about to happen. So how much does free will and how much control do they have? They have all of it. The problem is you don't know what you're giving away, or you don't know what marble is going to hit you that's going to cause you to make a choice and make a choice again and make a choice again. So Erathon was shown something in Curse of the Mist Wraith during that scene that altered the course of the choices he made through the entire rest of the series. And that scene will come back to you as a whole other platform when you're equipped to actually see what's going on. So this is the fun of it, is you read it through and you go, these characters are destined, they're predestined every step of the way. And then when you get to the finish, you realize, no, they really weren't. They really weren't. It's what are you willing to let go, or where are you willing to sell yourself out, or what's going to tear your heartstrings to the point where you can't give it up. Lyser's sacrifice of Talith, he tore his heartstrings to bits because he felt his moral high ground demanded that he give that up as a weakness. So you'll come to look at all of the choices made, and you'll say that each choice is made in a framework. And as that framework alters, it alters the choices or maybe reinforces them. Sometimes in a good way, maybe in a bad way. It depends what you're not willing to let go of. What was it somebody said? Trust is not trustworthy if the person you're with has an agenda. If that person has an agenda, they're not trustworthy anymore because their agenda is always going to steer it. And you may have the same agenda and you may trust together, but that agenda doesn't pay attention in the moment. It always steers the framework. So what you're talking about right there is steering that framework, and that stepping into the White Brotherhood's hostel or Aths Adepts. Suddenly you're in a framework where all of your choices are steering the framework. You're in a reality where everything you believe and everything you think and everything that you react to and all of your emotions, boom, it has manifested. That's how powerful those adepts are. And that's what they're shepherding at the center of their hostels. Has nothing to do with whether the vines are growing over the walls on the outside. They're all about the inner picture.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And I think quickly to Niko's point, there also is the aspect of what the characters understand initially about their heritage, their destiny, their lineage, and how big a responsibility they actually had. Because it's not, they start off as lords, they start off as heirs to kings, they start off as important people. But then it's revealed how much bigger that is, that they're heirs of the high kings. Like they don't just start off being shepherds boys and no ones, right? They start off as important people with important destinies in their own right, seemingly, right? But then it just gets so much bigger. And for me, that was maybe the thing that, really hits me as I think about the series and as I keep reading, that these two individuals thought they were one thing and perhaps thought, their path was going to be this. But then as things progressed, it became so much larger, right? So it's one thing to think that, you're destined to be, the ruler of a smaller country. It's another thing to believe that you are going to essentially save the fate of the world rests on your shoulders, and the fate of you coming into your inheritance and establishing your kingdom rests, like that's another thing altogether. So and Arathon especially feeling that he's willing to he must potentially sacrifice all that in order to save the world, unless you're thinking that unless he establishes this kingdom, then the world won't exist. So I love the contrast there.
It's a wider contrast than you know yet. As you understand what charter law is and what that's all founded on, the kingdom's charter law, totally not what you think. But I had to start somewhere. I mean, I was wrestling with such huge concepts. So when you pick up Curse of the Mistwraith, a lot of things look pretty, oh yeah, we've seen this in fantasy before. I wanted some of those assumptions in place because, first of all, it was too much to swallow to see all the layers at once. It would have read like a textbook. And second of all, there were things that I wanted to point out about that type of history, that type of rulership, that type of let's expand unlimitedly into the world. So as you start to see that what you thought, as the assumptions start to crumble, you see an alternate view of what could be, what is different, why these kingdoms were set up to begin with, why there is a fixed bloodline, why it's not at all what you think, and it's not at all traditional to fantasy as you get down the road. But I had to peel those layers very slowly because it was way too much to swallow. I mean, Cycle of Fire came out when there was no such thing as science fantasy, and people weren't ready for it. So at the time that this series was conceived, there was not an entry point for what I'm doing now. But it's very powerful in the way it unwinds. I'm not sorry that I did it the way I did. So it's really fun to see what your opinion is of who these guys are. Oh, are they aristocrats? Really? Are they you're going to have some fun as you go down the line and you actually see what the dynamic is beneath this. It'll be fun. We had a question here about 2023. I won't know when I turn it in. Then they will start discussing pub date. I know that they're making plans to get it into copy edit pretty fast, but I don't know what the date's going to be, and I will not make promises until the publisher has it in their catalog. Because even if they say the date could be this, if something else turns in, like George Martin, and they want to flip my book later to fit another book in that's going to make a bigger splash, they will rearrange their schedules as they please. And I don't like it when readership gets the wrong steer, because it hurts too much. So when I know there's a firm date, I will announce a firm date. Beyond that, it's not in my control. What will control it? Numbers, because if the numbers are paying them off, then they won't bump it or do weird things to it. So I want to see it as fast as possible. I'm doing everything I possibly can. I could not rush the writing of it because there were too many things that were important, and I pretty much was left on my own to do it myself. So it had to wait until I had all the pieces together and could do it properly. It's now finished. I'm got the story part 100% in order. It could hit the editor's desk tomorrow. I'm just working on the glossary and the surrounding material, like the timeline. And I should have that polished by the rest of this weekend. So I'm expecting to turn in Monday, Tuesday in there. And there will be a big announcement and a party.
All right.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
That's awesome.
Yes, congratulations. So, to wrap up, do we discuss the ending and then close up the discussion? Blaise?
The ending. Yeah. So big build up for the ending over the last several chapters. I remember the first time reading Warhost with Lysair's like battalion marching into the mountains, and then the realization that there's just a huge rock slide, and just the scenes and the writing of the death toll just mounting up until that point. I mean, you can see the gut wrenching events in Curse and the effect that had on you. But this one, I felt like it was kind of like foreshadowed, and I still completely missed it. I just can't get over, and then you get over the destruction and the effects from that. And then, as PL was saying, Deegan and KO, like Gale was holding him in his arms as he was dying at the end. It's just an emotional gut punch after emotional gut punch, and you see it like section after section after section. It was just wild. I loved this ending. I did not love how it made me feel sometimes, but it was just brilliantly done. That's one thing you do really well, Janny, is you nail your endings every single time. Now, you won't always have the same emotional impact that you'll have in scenes than others, but it's always nailed, and you always know what you're doing. And just building the stage for Arc 3, which you guys are in for a treat on that one. So those are my two thoughts on that.
Yeah, but the ending, the ending you're talking about is rough, but also the real ending. Putting all the rats in the sack and shaking it. Didn't you have fun with the Sabridian brothers being duped, being captured one by one and dumped in it? You're supposed to be able to end with a laugh on that one.
Yeah. It's just funny how, Erathon did in the end, if you think about it, although now he basically has to take to the seas, and he's fleeing to stop more bloodshed at the end of the day. He's fleeing. Yes, he has a separate mission. He's looking for the Parabians. That's all part of it. But he's fleeing to avoid the kind of bloodshed that he was forced to enact, in this book. But yeah, it's just funny how he convinces all the brothers to fool Lysair and stay, but actually be loyal to Erathon. And I feel like you know, and maybe I'm wrong, and obviously I've read Fugitive Prince, but I wonder how many more victories Arathon could snatch from defeat. That's what really has me worried for him, because so far he's paid a high price. It's not that he hasn't suffered. It's not that he's suffered because of the suffering of others, but essentially he's alive, right? And you just wonder how much longer can he stay ahead of Lysier, and how much longer can he, evade the type of, the ultimate, he's paid a heavy cost in terms of the losses of some of his allies and the innocence and the collateral damage so far. But I just wonder how much longer he can avoid that specifically. I'm worried for him.
You better be, because Lysair pretty much walks away from the field at Vastmark saying, I'm going to start a religion. I need people to die for me with no questions. So yeah, the stakes are going to ramp. They're going to ramp huge. You should be frightened.
That's exactly what came into my mind. He's building kind of a religion who can follow him without any questions asked. That was a word that came to my mind, like a cult or something like that. And that's really scary. And it's going to be much more difficult, I think, for Arathon. So it kind of frustrates me sometimes that no amount of reasoning works with Lysair, because a lot of people have tried to convince him, even the fellowship guys, but it just doesn't work with him.
Yeah. And I'd like to note that the whole starting a religion thing is also what right in front of your face, Janny, and what is it, like the first sentence of the prologue of book 1? Pretty much, at least.
Canon of light.
I just it's given to you right there. You don't know it's coming quite yet, but with the ending, for me, and trying to hit it from kind of a different side, because it's so multifaceted, and I definitely agree with what people have said so far. But it's the thing I think that gets it the most for me is it's such a different approach from what you normally see. We have, Arathon has been on the run. He's been trying to avoid this battle. He's been trying to do everything he can to delay, not because he's afraid he'll lose, because he's afraid of what he'll have to do to win. And it's such a different look, and down to like he's trying to be as brutal as possible. And like, the first time where they slaughter an entire group of Lysair's men in order to be like, look, turn back. It's going to be this the whole time. And even, his clansmen who are like absolutely out for blood, some of them are just like, oh, this is terrible. I don't know if I can do this. That's how bad like some of this stuff is getting. And yet it's still, he's fighting toward not having to just annihilate his enemy. And it's such a unique approach, and seeing it, and then seeing it get so close to being able to stop it, and still has to do it. And just what that does to him, what that does to Lysair, all of the loss of life, what that does, and the impact that has on all of the characters who are in there. I think we're going to continue to see for a long time the impacts of how this book ends. And
yeah, well, he tells the guy, you're going back as my ambassadors to turn this Warhost away. And the older officer says, you're trying to gut our morale. And he says, no, I'm trying to save their sorry lives. That's everything right there. And yeah, that's the turning point for Chaol too, where Chaol basically trades places with what he was before. There's some powerful moments in this book. I don't want to give anything away at all, because Arc 3's discussions are going to be really interesting, because you can project forward for this, but you're still not going to see what's going to come. So yeah, I wanted to end with the Sabridian brothers, the crabs in the sack, put them in the same sack and let them fight until they figure this out. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. Because this book was such an emotional gut punch. I had to end it with a note that didn't leave you in that space.
You do walk the line of being like the serious and the emotions, and then when to put levity, when it's appropriate, when it's needed, and you do it so well. Because yeah, you can have moments like that where you're like laughing right after you're reading just the most like horrible, emotional damage type of thing. And so it's done really well to keep you there for sure.
Yeah. I also want to quickly add that, and as well, Lysier, it's as Niko pointed out, they, almost line one of the series, this is hinted that Lysier is going to start this cult religion. He's going to, but part of that, what really hit me is that he's determined that, well, essentially, the way he's going, part of his path to establish the religion, he's going to undercut the fellowship and the credit. He's basically declared war on magic, except his own. Any other magic that's out there is essentially, is wicked sorcery, is heresy, etc. But mine is going to be the way, the light, the path, and I absolutely love that. And that shows you, I think, that if I had no illusions about who and what Lysier was, that showed me who and what he was. The only caveat is, as Janny said, well, what if both the fellowship and the cranny are bad? Right? So, in other words, is Lysier doing bad to do bad? Is he doing bad to do good? Is he just focusing on him and his, like, there's so, I'm just wondering where this is going to go, because, it would seem on face, he's creating this cult. He's doing it for selfish reasons. He's doing it, and he's willing to sacrifice anyone, right? And he needs that. But is that all there is to it? With this, and that's what's got in my head now, because I don't trust Janny anymore. She likes to mess with you, so I'm trying to. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But
you will be messed with. There's some pretty critical scenes coming up in Fugitive Prince that you may have run right by. But yeah, you'll get messed with. You'll get messed with. Even everybody's going to get messed with, because you finish this book and you think you know what's going on. You think what's at stake here. You think what Lysier is about to do. You don't have any idea of the impact of what's going to come out of this. And it'll be fun to watch Arc 3 unfold for you. It's a real privilege to be here and see the excitement building, because I know where it's going and I can say it's all in the can. So it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting. And I feel like this is one of the first moments in my career where I feel like that these books are being appreciated for what went into them. And that's huge. It's like 50 years worth of work. I finally feel like, wow, they're getting it.
Wow. Right.
It's certainly a privilege to be able to talk with you about this as well. I mean, it's rarely have I gone into a series and so soon realized how important this series is going to be to me, and there's been only a handful of things where I've even thought, like, is this going to take over the throne of the greatest fantasy series of all time for me? And I've been let down before by some other series that seemed like they were going to do it, and I feel like this one definitely is on the right track to take over that.
Blaise seen it all, so he knows.
Having read the series in its entirety, it's surmounted on the top of my all-time favorite series, and I'm pretty sure that'll be the same for most people who read it. I'll keep going back to it. I'll try to do a reread every year or so. It's that important, and I want to experience it again and again, and just catch all the little things that I've missed, because it's that eye-opening and that revealing. And every time I reread one of these books, I feel like, I can't believe I missed that. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I did this reread, because you appreciate it that much more. It's rare for me to reread anything, but this series, it's one that I will always. So
I am partway through this series and partway through Malazan, and I've read, I haven't read all the major fantasy series there, because that's what's considered major out there, but it's already my favorite fantasy series, only 4 books in. And the reason is because it's my favorite fantasy series 4 books in, that I still don't know what's going on. But it is so incredible. So I can only imagine how I'm going to feel when I finish the series. And because I'm reading it alongside Malazan, it's a direct kind of, compare, contrast, etc.
Comparison.
Yeah. So if and contrast, because they're different, right? But I can say that, I don't know what other people feel, but Janny Wurts needs to be mentioned with the greatest fantasy writers, epic fantasy writers of all time, with the
Of course.
Tolkiens and the Ericksons and the Jordans and whoever, the George R. R. Martins and whoever you put up there, right? Very early on when you start reading the series, you will realize she deserves to be up there. And like I said, I'm not finished yet. So I've read enough that I think I'm qualified to say that. So I would certainly think that once you finish the series, someone like Blaise, he's eminently qualified to say that. So
I couldn't agree more at all, PL, with just so early on, I realized too that fits it. And I mean, like, that's, Wheel of Time, Realm of the Younglings, Malazan, Memory of Sauronthorn, all things I've read and have loved for the most part. And it's like right up there. Janny needs to be as well. I've rarely, the only other author I feel like that I fell in love with that just does not get enough attention is probably Kate Elliott. And so it was a similar thing there. And then I start Janny Wurts, and I'm like, oh my gosh, here's yet another, started publishing around the same time and just not get the attention at all that's deserved. Because these are, just even individually some of the best books that I've ever read. And so finishing the series, I cannot wait. I really cannot wait. So.
Well, I can't wait too, because the word on this one needs to get out. It really does. It's had a very checkered publishing history. That's part of what stalled it. Editors leaving right as first books were being released stalled it. It's just been repeatedly been kicked just by crazy stuff in the industry. And maybe now is this moment. It's this moment in time. But nothing would make me happier than to see it get out there and be read, because there's so many powerful themes that are even more relevant now than they were when it was conceived. And yet when it was conceived, all these themes were designed to be included. I wanted to put in this series what I had found missing in fantasy everywhere. Missing. So I wanted to get that critical thinking going. I wanted to show multiple viewpoints from multiple layers of moral perspective and what happens when the frame is too rigid and people can't see around their own beliefs. I wanted to turn things upside down a little bit, where maybe the blonde, charismatic, wonderful guy who controls light isn't necessarily always the good guy. I wanted to explore some themes that maybe the guy who's running the major war campaign is not the guy you want at the peace table. I wanted to turn things and mix it up and shake the box and spit it out upside down, not glorify war, not do what fantasy has done beautifully, not write a mythic piece that reinforces the myths that we're living that are screwing us up, but breaks the myths that are screwing us up. And beyond that, I wanted to take up the gauntlet, which Ursula Le Guin threw down and said, can't we come up with a better system? Can't we evolve something different? Can't we come up with something better than capitalism, or come up with something better than colonialism? Those themes are not going to be in your face, because I didn't do the traditional approach to them. But when you reach the end of this series, it will be glaringly obvious that this suggests a second path, a different evolution, one that we're so mired in our cement feet, we cannot go there. We cannot walk there. I'm literally watching progress that was made in 50 years being reversed in our real world, because we're going to cement ourselves right back in. We're going to revolve. We are not going to evolve. This series was designed to evolve a different kind of thinking, starting with a very traditional looking fantasy and then just breaking the envelope one after the next. Blaise, answer me. Did I do it?
You did it in spades. Every step of the way with each book, it reinforces evolution and different ways of thinking and people getting around their own prejudices. And the effects of free will, and if you really have it or not, and who's affecting it. Who can you trust? Who is ultimately holding the pen at the end of the day? And is that ever going to change hands? It's the constant themes that you keep reinforcing.
So
And,
yeah, I almost feel like people will not be able to place this series until they have read the final book, or even get into arc 4 and see what arc 4 starts to unfold for you. Because from Peril's Gate forward, and particularly as arc 4 takes off, that is where the envelope starts to shatter left and right. And yet the hints of it were already there, walking into that hostel in Ships of Marior when Lysor walks in to that acid depths. And it's what they're doing at their level and has no clue what thin ice he's skating on. So these themes are going to repeat. And so I'm really grateful to have you all here today. It just means so much, because I feel like the light is reaching into the box, and maybe the series will be seen by the right readers, maybe not en masse, but the right readers have a chance of finding it today because of what you're doing, Angie and Blaise, and every one of you, and Paul. I'm just grateful, the bottom of my heart, all of you. And you having come in with knowing the cycle of fire and seeing the upstep. I actually took facets of this bigger story and worked them in smaller books so that I could get a grip on the craft to actually tackle this. It could not be my first novel. Curse of the Mistwraith could not be my first novel. Went through 19 rewrites to get what you have now. And it is tough to get through. It's the hardest book of the series to get through, but everything that's in there has to be there. You just don't know why it's there yet.
It has to be read with that passion, I think, the passion with which you wrote it.
That's a very good point.
So a lot of our viewers are thanking Janny for the amazing imagination and commitment, and complimenting it as the pinnacle of this type of literature. So high praise is coming from our viewers.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Go out there and talk about it, because that will give it reach. I've done my job. This little room here, I made it happen. It's up to the readership to make it walk.
I'll certainly be crusading for this, for you as an author in general in this series, I think, for a very long time to come. And it's great to see some others too, like, with Philip Chase starting a read along, I think should be pretty huge, because he's got a really nice reach as well. And so it's great to see it starting to get traction and just really get some movement here, because as I've been slowly going through and just been absolutely loving everything that I've had. And all of this, like, if you want to sell the book, Janny, I think just talk to anybody for like 20 minutes, and like, I don't know how you could not be sold, because you've made me like want to just do nothing for the next 2 months except read your books constantly with every waking moment. And so, man, I'm so excited to keep going and to keep talking about these books.
There's a couple of things I should probably say. If you've just read the Empire series and you're still younger, not into your 20s yet, unless you really think about things deeply, you may have started this series too young. So a lot of people try the series too young, and they're not ready for the themes that are in it. And they're reading it just for what happens, not for how it happens. So if you tried this series young and it didn't work for you, and you're older now, try it again. And now that it's on the ground, let's just hope that it does get talked about. We have a problem with the publishing, because London is the driving publisher for this. I had to pull some compromises to get the books under contract and get them out and get it finished. And one of the things I had to do was not have a US publisher, because there just was no room to restart a series at this depth at the point it was dropped. So the books are being printed in London. It takes 3 months to print them, get them on a container. It takes another month for Harper 360 in New York to unpack them and get them into the distribution chain. We are going to have a distribution problem, and it is going to be going on for a while, because as the interest builds, the reprint numbers are too small. So all I can say is keep the hammer on, because numbers are what are going to convince them to print bigger. It's going to make them notice when they run out faster. The ebook sales, if they spike, they will see that. They will see that. So the more clout I can get, then we can possibly get the books printed in the US again. So North America won't constantly be going through a 4-month delay. And supply chain is causing even more delay because they used to be able to put in a reprint order and within 7 days, the book was going to press. Not anymore. The printers are backed up. Paper supplies are not there. So supply chain plus getting it on the container and getting it to the US, I'm working on it. It's being actively focused on right now. But the more we can make an explosion, then the quicker that I will be able, the more clout I will have to be able to twist things into favor. So I'm sorry that everybody's saying we cannot get the books. Just hammer for it. Let your independents know. Try to order it anyway. Order the ebook. Say you want the paper, write to my editors, which is HarperCollins Voyager in London. Let Harper 360 know in the United States. Just because I can't do this. I'm just me. All I could do was write the book. And I had to kind of put everything in the hopper and say, I can't stop the dominoes falling. I just have to finish the finale because that's more important than any of it. If the books never get finished, if the series never gets finished, we have nothing to work with. So my focus has been on that rather than letting everything that publishing was doing destroy my brain. But now is the moment to really sock it. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, like Niko said, a lot of booktubers now are getting into this series, and there are read-alongs planned and ongoing. So it's really a good time for the whole series, I'm sure. Yeah, any closing words from all of you?
Well, I just wanted to. Sorry, Blaise, go ahead.
No, you can go ahead, Bill.
No, I just want to say thank you, Angie, for the privilege of joining this discussion. You are wonderful, and I really appreciate it that you allow me to join. Everybody, Angie makes some fabulous content on her channel, and probably one of the more underrated booktubers. So I encourage everyone to check them out. I'm always sitting glued waiting for her stuff to come out so I can watch it myself. So, and she's an inspiration to me. So yeah, and just a wonderful, intelligent, insightful person. Niko, awesome getting to know you. I know you're a very popular booktuber, and you made some fabulous, some comments that really made me think. So yeah, great insights there too. And what can I say about Blaise? I mean, he's just that guy. He's a champion as to his moniker of Under the Radar Books. And he's done so much for the community and for authors, including myself. Can't thank you enough. So fantastic and so amazing to have someone like you get behind this incredible series because, it is phenomenal and your voice means a lot. And quickly for Janny, I mean, what people don't realize is that we just talked about how great an author Janny is. But the scary thing is she's even better a person. And she is someone who would help out anyone, anyone in the writing community. She goes out of her way to do that. Just after she does look for praise or for recognition, and she does so many things behind the scenes that nobody knows, that even I don't know. But from what I can see, she does quite a lot of it. And she's just a wonderful human, and that in itself means something. But beyond that, I guess I'll just conclude with, Guy Gabriel Kay, who is an icon in himself. He said about her book on the back, with each book becomes more and more obvious how important Janny Wurts is to contemporary fantasy. And I think that's how I'd like to conclude it, that I don't think people, some readers realize how iconic Janny actually is. She came out at the same time as a lot of these writers that people consider iconic. And for whatever reasons, she hasn't quite, in my mind at least, attained the recognition she deserves. But I think that's coming. So wish you nothing but success, Janny, and we're all behind you. And, can't wait to continue in this series.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, my first book was published in 1982. People often look at The Empire as first. It wasn't. That was like number 4. But I want to just point out, Paul is writing an amazing series called The Drowned Kingdom. And it is a powerful book. It's one that's going to alter how you think, alter what you feel. He's self-publishing it, which is almost a pity because I'd like to see it have a wider reach, but it is well worth your time, especially if you like the deeper themes, and especially if you like difficult characters that you can't always love. He is masterful at writing characters that have major flaws and still get your heart. So I just wanted to say thank you, Paul, for being here, because you could have been writing Pride of Lions this morning, or Lion's Pride. Yep, there you go. But you took your time for me,
Yeah.
and
Thanks, Niko.
it means the world. It honestly does. I feel like I've made so many friends. We've got a real international group here, and having new faces, meeting people. I feel like, we're in my living room. I wish you were. I wish that we were all popping a bottle of champagne. So thank you for giving your time. It really means the world to me right now. To see this series being appreciated, and I'm not dead yet. It's like, wow.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Angie for hosting us. This has been something that I've been looking forward to. Not just this particular episode, but the whole read along. Wanting to do this on a larger scale for some time. So thanks so much for hosting. Niko, it was so nice getting to know you and your insight. I would definitely be subscribing to your channel, looking for more content. Paul, love your series, love your passion, your inspiration, love everything about your series. Look out for Lord and King coming out later this year. It is his best work yet. And Janny, of course, you and I have been talking back and forth for the past over 2 years. When I first started this series, just stole my heart in every way possible. And I just remember the chats we were having, because whatever book I was on, what was coming, and then every time I got there, my reactions. We both have a laugh over it. So this has been a fantastic experience. I can't wait for you guys to get further along in the series. So some of the things that are in the back of my mind, I can finally talk about. And we'll get there slowly but surely. So cheers to everyone watching as well. It's been fantastic so far.
Yeah, and a huge thanks from me to Angie as well for including me in this. I had no idea that this was happening at first, and I popped on to the end of the Ships of Mariner when I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And she was gracious enough to invite me along for this one, which was just great. Because I've had such a great time. The Ships of Mariner was my book of the year last year. I finished it on New Year's Eve to make sure it would qualify it, because I knew it was going to be the book of the year. And I read a lot of fantastic books last year too, and so that was not something said lightly. But to be able to participate and just talk with Janny, with you directly, and with PL and Blaise and Angie and all of you as well, getting to know you a bit more, because I interacted with you a bit, but not a ton. This is definitely the most I've interacted with you guys. Angie, I've interacted with you a bit more over time as well, but it's great, doing something with you too, and just being able to have this conversation, have all of us with our different viewpoints, different thoughts going in, and talk to Janny, you in person here. And we even have camera today, so it's especially get that. This has been a blast. This is actually tomorrow's my birthday, and this is like my birthday present was this stream.
Happy
Wow.
birthday!
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
This was
Niko,
a really
you
good
added
start
so
to
much.
it.
You added so much to this discussion. I was really glad Angie invited you. You really added a lot. It's the more perspectives we have, the more these books open up. So thank you for being here.
I started my day by knocking over my entire thing of coffee and having to remake it. And so it's definitely gotten much better jumping on the stream after.
I can one up you on that. The cat threw up on our bed.
Oh, man, of course. Oh,
no.
man.
Not this morning. Not this morning.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh!
Life happens.
Yeah. I have 4 dogs, so I know.
Oh wow!
So I am really thankful to all of you for taking the time to join this discussion. And this is my first time after being a booktuber that, I'm interacting with an author once I started this read along. So, and I just couldn't believe it when Janny agreed. PL told me everybody calls him Paul. I call him PL. I hope he's okay with that. But so PL told me that, hey, I think Janny should be okay. Then I got introduced to Blaze, and that's how this whole thing came into place. And I am I'm just looking back. I'm thinking how much of a good fortune I have, to have Janny as the first author that I have on my channel, and it's just really, really good fortune. I'm truly thankful to her for writing this book and for agreeing to join us in this discussion, because reading the book is one thing, and getting the author's perspective and these small tidbits and insights and motivations and inspirations, it's so insightful. And special thanks to Niko, for agreeing to join, because I saw him popping into one of these ships of Meteor discussion, and then I thought, okay, if Niko has read it, it would be nice to get his perspective in as well. So thank you for agreeing to join. And Blaise,
No
thanks.
hesitation. The second you asked, I'm like, yes, 100% yes, I'd love to. So.
Yeah, and Blaise, thanks a lot for all that you're doing for the community. We're all very thankful that you bring in this really under the radar books, to the limelight. So thanks to you for that. And PL, I promise I'm reading your book this month, and I cannot wait. In fact, I did read 3 chapters earlier last year, but because of other commitments, I just couldn't continue. So I'm really looking forward to it. And thanks for the wonderful insights and feeling all your emotions and feelings about the books today. And Janny, last but not the least, I don't know how much I can thank you for writing this wonderful series. Yeah, and I'm really happy that I could do my little part in, I don't know, crusading for this book.
It's not so little, and it's absolutely mind-blowing to have somebody from the other side of the world talking about this book and what you've gone through to juggle the time and get this group of people together. It is not easy where you're located. So from the bottom of my heart to all of my international readers, for you having the courage to undertake this, it just means so much. And it also makes me feel like it completes the circle, because this wasn't just written for a small group of people or from one viewpoint or one vantage or one international or one religion or one anything. I wanted something that had a universal in a section, and seeing the international and the variety of people who are coming to this. Oh my gosh, I got a letter from somebody from Kosovo. I've gotten letters from people from the Arab Emirate. I've gotten people from Africa that were reading this to learn how to see around tribal context. And so I've gotten letters from South America and Mexico. To have something reach an intersectional group like that is just like mind-blowing. One little tiny idea in this little tiny room could go that big. So thank you for championing this. It means more to me than you will ever know.
Thank you. All right, so I think once again, I will thank all of you, and I'm really looking forward to the beginning of the next arc, next book, and I will soon set up the live for that. I hope all of us can make it. Right, and we will meet you soon next month. Thanks everybody for joining.
One more thing I want to point out: the cover that you're holding up there, Paul, that painting was stolen. The original painting to Warhost at Vastmark was stolen out of a crate. 21 paintings we sent to World Fantasy in Baltimore in the mid-70s, and the entire crate got stolen. There was 2 Cycle of Fire paintings, Shadowfane and Keeper of the Keys, the big portraits that were done. Warhost got lost in that shipment, and 20 paintings of Dawn, 19 paintings of Dawn's, 1 Stephen King, and a lot of his best art for that year. There is still a reward. It disappeared off a FedEx truck. So if you ever see this painting out in the wild, I'd love to find out what happened to it, and I would love it for it to come home. And I really don't care about any kind of person getting, who is responsible. I really don't care. Just send the paintings back. That's all we want is our paintings to come back. So there is a whole section on the website on those stolen paintings, how it happened and what the images are. If you run across these works, we're trying to get them home again. It was a really awful, awful moment in time when that happened. So just spreading the word on that one so that hopefully maybe we can find out what happened and get those paintings home.
I really hope we do. All right. So thanks everybody for joining, and we will see you soon in our discussion of book 4 next month, hopefully. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.